Hi, Ben Salisbury here. You're about to watch a recording of a LinkedIn Live event I did a few months ago, and it was all about helping winery owners, distillery owners, sales or marketing professionals take their skills in selling to new levels, to use a modern approach to selling. And what I mean by that is not using a transactional approach where you pull samples, get in front of a buyer that you've never met, and just start talking about your product. This way of selling, this transactional way of selling, is extremely ineffective, not to mention offensive. There's a much better way to sell, and that's what this webinar is all about. So I invite you to take notes, pay close attention, and let us know if you have any questions. Enjoy the webinar. We're going to be talking about selling to key accounts. It's kind of a follow-up from last week's live broadcast, which was all about how to research and find the richest targets in any market. And that was recorded. So for those of you who are cut from the old school cloth of selling, those of you that have been selling wine and spirits for a long time, you may be very disturbed by some of the things I'm going to be sharing with you today, because you've been selling the same way for so long. You don't know any other way, never even considered another way. And so you may find this to be a bit offensive. So I'm warning you now, if you're not interested in more modern ways of selling, you should probably disconnect. What I promised when I posted this live event coming was how and why to shift from a very transactional, very product-focused sales approach to more of a relationship-driven, customer-focused approach. Now, I've been doing this for 38 years, and I know what I'm talking about when it comes to how to sell a lot of wine and spirits. And I'm continually amazed how many people have reduced this process to a simple transaction where you come in with a sample bag and you pop some corks or twist the top and start sampling and talking about the product. We're going to bust through that today. If that's how you sell, I want to really invite you to open your mind up to some new ways of thinking. There are great benefits to moving from a transactional approach to a more relationship-driven focus. And these are just some of them. First of all, you're going to convert a lot more on a percentage basis. So for every 10 people you meet with and sell to, you're going to close a lot more sales if you move away from a transactional type of selling. Also, the placements you make this way tend to be a lot stickier. There's a tremendous amount of churn in our industry. And it's almost by necessity, because if you look at the average distributor, small, medium, or large, doesn't matter. They've got a lot of masters to serve in the portfolio. And one of the ways that they are able to meet the needs of so many different suppliers and so many different brands is that you have to have churn. You place a Chardonnay by the glass. As soon as it's gone, you replace it with another. You've got blitzes going on. You've got supplier work with. Churn is a necessary part of serving the needs of all those suppliers. But those are not good placements. What a waste of time to make a placement that only sticks for, one or two cases and then it's out. We want stickier placements. They're going to stay in place for a long time. Also, the bigger the account, the less it's about transactional selling. I spent 17 years selling to major national and international restaurant and hotel chains, major accounts, right? Capable of tens of thousands of cases of product a year. There's no transactional selling going on in that world. And a lot of what I learned about how to make sticky placements was from calling on these major accounts. It's also a lot more profitable for you to sell in a non-transactional way. I have a great video on my YouTube channel called "Lowering the Price to Make a Sale is for Cowards." A lot of people think that to make a sale, you have to have the best price, which is absolute BS. Price is only an issue in the absence of value. So you do not need to lower the price. So when you learn to sell in a non-transactional way, something that's more customer focused, bringing business value to the relationship, you do not have to lower your price, because you're bringing something to the table besides just a low price. So there are great benefits to this. If you're just joining us, I got to put this warning up one last time so I don't offend anybody. When I start talking about the traditional ways that wine and spirits are sold and suggest something different, many of you are going to be offended. So you have been warned. One thing you're going to notice, let me back up here. One thing you're going to notice is when I advise people and coach people how to do be more successful in selling, I never, ever, not one time talk about how you need to increase your product knowledge. So see, I've already started to offend some people. Now, here's the conventional wisdom. This is a fact. I've observed it over almost 40 years of doing this. The conventional wisdom is you need the distributor to open doors for you. That's why we do work with and why we travel to a city and line up work with for the distributor. Just not true. It's certainly one way to do it, but it's not the only way. And while we're on this live broadcast, there are hundreds of suppliers out meeting with restaurants and retailers right now without a distributor present. Oh, sure, they're going to report back and share the minutes of their meeting, if you will. But if you're one of those people who believes that you have to have the distributor open the account's doors for you, it's just not true. Also, there's a conventional wisdom that, look, I'm in front of this buyer. I've got 10 minutes. I have to strike while the iron is hot. I may not get another opportunity like this. If you ever find yourself in that position, you have just fallen into a terrible, terrible trap, which is that, you've got to, get your pitch out and talk about the product and close that sale. This is a horrible, horrible, low probability way to sell. So I'm back to my my warning label here, because if this is how you sell, you're probably not going to, either you're not going to like me or you're going to have your mind opened to some new things. And that's my purpose today, to open your mind up to a better way of doing it. And the environment itself, many people believe that the environment itself, the environment of selling wine and spirits, is just transactional. That's just how it is. That's how it's sold. Well, a lot of it is, of course, but it doesn't have to be. And I submit to you that that's not real selling. So if I've got your attention, let's move on. I want to offer this exhibit. This was taken just this week. I went into winejobs.com. I went looking at job descriptions for district manager, regional manager, market manager, someone to do a combination of managing distributors and also, personally out there selling. I cut and pasted these right out of the job description. I think I did a pretty good job concealing who it was that posted this. But honestly, this could have been, it could have been any number of different wine companies advertising. But I want to point out a few things. This first bullet point, key account responsibility, calls on the top 200 general market, and that's a mix of on and off premise, national and regional. 200. Okay, in order to buy off on this and to think that you can call on 200 accounts, you must adopt a transactional approach. You must do lots and lots and lots and lots of knocking on doors, lots and lots of samples, pulling corks, talking about the wine, presenting the wine. Otherwise, because really this is ridiculous. Nobody can call on 200 accounts. No one. Unless you think it's possible to just hit them, just go right down the line and do these quick hits and see lots of accounts. If you think there's a relationship between the number of sales calls you make and your success in selling, you are way, way out of it, way behind the curve. This is so it's ridiculous. I would never go to work for a company that expects me to call on 200 accounts. Just not practical. Not if you want to make a lot of sales. The second point is collaborative planning with distributors. Nothing wrong with that. But this idea that getting out and working with reps in order to get in front of buyers, this is not a get rich slow. It's not get rich at all. It's a recipe for giant waste of time selling just a few boxes here and there. Again, I know I'm offending some people, but there's a much better way. And the sooner you learn it and start, maybe you're not ready to completely let go of the old way of selling, but you should seriously consider incorporating some of the things you're going to learn today. The last bullet on this ad that I want to point out was 80% of the time allocated to field sales work, 20% of the time allocated to administrative duties, which they say include development of a plan, budget management, and development of presentation. So I got two problems with this. One is this is a very, very old way of thinking. that you should be 80% of your time in front of customers selling, pitching, talking about your products, and 20% of your time in the office. I would flip that on its head. And I've had tremendous success selling lots of wine and spirits. And the vast majority of my time was spent researching and preparing to sell. So that is really a flawed way of looking at the world. But there's so many companies that see it that way. The other problem with this statement is this development of presentations, this idea that somehow a great presentation is going to result in a sale. This is so old. This is so old-fashioned, so outdated that it literally hurts. I mean, it hurts to think about it. But yet for many people in our industry, this is the only way they sell. It's always how they've sold. That's why they gravitate towards trade tastings and wine dinners and work with, because they think this is the game. Get in front of the client with your product, start talking about your product and the features and benefits of your product. This is a very, very old way of selling that went out a long, long time ago. Now, quick pause. Why in the heck should you listen to me? Why would you spend 5 minutes listening to me? What do I know about selling wine and spirits? Well, at the risk of being immodest, I know a lot. I've spent 38 years selling wine and spirits. 17 of those were working for publicly traded major companies, St. Michel Wine Estates and Constellation brands. What you see, this little chart you see here, is the 12 years that I spent at St. Michel. This was our department sales, where we went from 50,000 cases a year to 465,000 cases a year. So believe me when I tell you, I know a thing or two about being successful selling wine and spirits. And talking about making a product-only presentation or a presentation that's cold with no relationship to a buyer that's never met you, this is not a way to sell a lot of product. So if I still have your attention, let's move on. You know, I don't meet a lot of people in the wine and spirits business who spend their sales preparation time reading books about selling. You know what they're usually doing? They're taking WSET classes or Master Sum classes. Nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong. We sell a very complex product and it requires a lot of product knowledge. But I don't meet a lot of people who have immersed themselves in the art of selling and selling in a masterful, modern way. These are some of my favorite books on selling, and I'm going to reference a few of them in this presentation. Now, I don't hire salespeople anymore. I do have one salesperson working for me now. She's great. Her name is Marcia. In my past life, though, I hired, trained, and managed more than 30 different account managers. And I would always ask them, tell me about the books that you have read about selling, and let's get into some specifics about those books. I don't meet a lot of people who have gone this deep into selling, but in the wine and spirits industry sure could use a lot of this, let me just tell you. And if you want the Cliff Notes version, if you just want to go straight to the finish line and not listen to me anymore today, go to my website, salisburycreative.com, click on the Modern Playbook, and you'll watch 6 short videos that will kind of give you the skinny on the modern way of selling. But if you're willing to go with me a little further today, let's walk through some stuff. Now, this comes right out of the book, Mastering the Complex Sale, which is one of my favorite books of all time when it comes to selling. It isn't just for big accounts like chains. It can work for any selling environment for any product. But I want you to look at something with me. It talks about 3 eras of selling. Look at the years for era 1, 1955 to 1975. It was about the sales script, presenting and closing, and the role of this era of sales was being a persuader. Anybody want to guess? And feel free to put a comment in the comment section if you want. But this is where most people are still selling right now while we're sitting here. Most people still believe that selling is about persuasion and presenting and talking about the attributes of the product. This is a style of selling that went out in the 70s. So what do we have after that? We have era 2, which is a little bit more. This is where consultative selling comes from. If you were selling in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a lot of talk, a lot of books about consultative selling, where you were doing more asking questions and listening and building trust instead of presenting all the time. Now, this was certainly a great improvement over era 1 selling. But what we want to focus on today is era 3 selling. And by the way, I have a comment about I want to pull a quote about this way of selling, which so many people still do. Stuck in the 50s and 60s, it's crazy. This is one of my favorite books called Indispensable: How to Become the Company That Your Customers Can't Live Without, or the salesperson your customers can't live without. I love this quote. The old days of getting the appointment to make your presentation and then waiting to overcome objections is so yesterday's news, it hurts. And that was written in 2007. So if it was old yesterday's news in 2007, it certainly is in 2022. I may be tempted to flash up the warning again that I'm offending people, but this is the reality. If you're still selling like it's 1965, it's time to give the program. Era 3 is the era we're in now, which is all about business process analysis, business acumen, business knowledge, being a source of business advantage. That is how to sell. Now, this could be a really difficult transaction if all you've ever done is talk about the product that's in the bottle, but it's so worth it. It's so absolutely worth it, and it can transform your sales. So what do we mean by business processes? Well, let's just look at restaurants for a minute, okay? You want to sell a product to a restaurant. You want to get on their cocktail menu. You want to get on their wine by the glass list, or banquet list, or happy hour list, or late night list, or Sunday brunch list. Then you better have something other than a good product, because they need your vodka like a hole in the head. They have absolutely no trouble finding a great Chardonnay for $7. They don't need yours. So you better have something else that you're bringing to the business relationship besides your product. A product-focused way of selling is really amateurish, and it's only going to take you so far. You want to get on the banquet list of a major restaurant that can buy 100, 200 cases a month of a single SKU, then you better have something better than a good product and a good price. And these are what I'm suggesting you have. You need to be able to bring excellence and elevated business processes to the relationship. Help them improve their assortment. Collect menus from their competitors. Do an analysis of their competitors. Bring trend reports, they're just all over the place these days. Most restaurant operators, the average restaurant has about 17 wines by the glass. They don't really have time to do the research of what's trending and what's not. So you could be a true asset to them. So helping with assortment, helping with incidents, which has to do with the percentage of people ordering something. So for every 100 people who come there, what percentage of them order dessert? That's your level of incidence for dessert sales. Well, the same goes for cocktail sales, appetizer sales, and wine, etc. Showing them how to improve their incidence, helping them improve it, is a great way to bring business value to the relationship. Helping them increase foot traffic with events and etc. Helping them understand how to turn their inventory and thereby manage their cash flow, not tying up with so much product in inventory. Helping them be more profitable, helping them with the math of how they're pricing their products and how they should price their products across the spectrum of their cocktail menu or across the spectrum of their wine list. This is an area of expertise that you'd be surprised many restaurants don't have it. You could be that resource. Helping with cash flow, as I mentioned, inventory turns, and of course, supply chain issues. Nothing more frustrating to a restaurant than having supply chain issues. For most of my wine selling and spirit selling career, I've tried to position myself thusly. I don't want to be known as a wine salesperson or a wine expert or a spirits expert who happens to sell to restaurants or retailers. I want to be known as a restaurant expert who happens to sell wine. And that's exactly how I built a very successful career. Now, I've got 2 videos on my YouTube channel I want to send you to. I highly suggest you watch them. My number 1 most viewed video with over 12,000 views is called The Secret to Selling Wine and Spirits on Premise. And it dives into the specifics of this. It's a little bit in your face, which is why I think people love it, because they're not used to being talked to like this. They've never really heard anybody talk about bringing business value to the relationship. And look at it this way. A sale should be a byproduct of a much larger relationship based on bringing real business value to the relationship. When you sell that way, you're going to sell more product than you ever thought possible. And another great video is 3 things every restaurant wants and how to give it to them. Because if you understand that and you give them those things, they're going to buy your product every single week. So I hope this makes sense. I'm going to take a quick breather here and pause to see if there are any questions. Feel free to add a comment. And some of the comments you put in the comments might be, Ben, you're a loony. Go jump off a bridge. That's fine. I'm a big boy. I can take it. Maybe I'm making some sense and you're like, you know what? Mind blown. No one's ever taught me this. I'd love to hear that kind of comment. Or maybe you have a question. So take a minute. I can see the comments. I'm watching them right now. So as you toss them in there, I will stop and address them. Now, I think there's a little bit of a lag between the time I ask you to leave a comment and the time it actually shows up, but that's okay. Just go ahead and toss them in when you feel led to do so. Okay, pressing on. Now, this is really important. If you don't listen or watch anything else I do, these next few slides are really why you came here today. These are the things because I'm going to show you how to do this, okay? So think about this continuum. The red line is a time continuum. If your first interaction with a customer coincides or is too close to when you're presenting solutions or presenting products, you are doomed for failure. And God forbid that your first presentation and your first interaction with the client are all at the same time. Boy, that is just a losing proposition. At most, they're going to buy a case or two to get rid of you, pour it off by the glass, and then on to something else. So, but many people, this is how they sell. But let's talk about what's wrong with this, and then we're going to talk about the alternative. This is what transactional selling is all about. It's a cold interaction. I've never met you, Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, but I'm going to sit here and talk about my product. I'm going to tell you how the grapes were grown, how the wine was made, all about the winemaker and his family, how many generations his family has been making wine. I'm going to tell you all about the vineyards and all about our sustainability and our responsible growing practices. I'm going to keep talking about these things until you buy or die from boredom. And it's all about the product, right? It's all about talking about the product. This is a horrible, horrible way to sell. It went out in the 50s, as I've already pointed out. A few more things that are wrong with this. This really requires a more is more approach. No wonder that job ad we saw talked about calling on 200 accounts. You would need to call on 200 accounts if this is how you're going to sell to make sales. And when you do make sales, we're only talking about a couple cases at a time. But yet our whole industry seems to be built around this model of transactional selling. I don't see any comments at all. So either I've lost the entire audience or people are just so enthralled they can't reach the keyboard. I'm going to press on anyway. So here's a better way. What you want to do is create space between that first client interaction and the time that you present something or offer up some solution. Because there's a lot of work to do in that interim. There's work to do before. The reason I didn't put this little cone all the way to the left is there's a lot of work to do before you even have the first interaction. There's a lot of research to be done and a lot of homework to do. The first interaction shouldn't involve presenting. There'll be time for that later. Relationship first, sales presentations later. So this really is the key. This is the big shift I'm inviting you to make today. Let's talk about the benefits of this. So this is relationship selling. This is putting the customer first. Build a relationship, establish rapport, offer real value to the business relationship. The sale then will be merely a byproduct of that much larger relationship. This isn't theory. This is actually how you should be selling if you want to sell more product than you ever thought possible. In this way of selling, you don't need 200 accounts. You need just a few well-qualified accounts. This is leveraging the 80-20 rule. But here, when you make a sale this way, you're selling 10, 20, 40, or even hundreds of cases at a time. So real selling of wine and spirits is about fewer, well-chosen accounts and positioning yourself as someone who brings real value to the business relationship. So again, feel free to make comments. Feel free to add questions in the comments section. I'm going to keep rolling along. Now, I want to camp out on this slide for a little bit because just a minute ago I mentioned there's work to be done at each of these stages. Now, I borrowed heavily from this book, Mastering the Complex Sale, to create my own little 4-step process for selling. And these are the 4 steps. There's the discovery phase, which is all the things you do before you even have your first customer interaction. The next phase is after that first interaction, and beginning with it, it's all about building rapport, asking questions. And you shouldn't ask questions of things you should have already known during your research. But the rapport building phase is very important, because from there you move into collaboration, which is more about understanding what their needs are and their pain points and how you might be able to help them, things that they've struggled with. At that point, you might be ready to make some kind of a presentation, and not just about your products, but on solutions, business solutions that's going to improve their business. And then after the sale is made, becomes the real work, which is servicing the account, making sure the price that you quoted is what is being delivered, making sure they don't have supply interruptions. This is such a huge problem, especially for restaurants who do not have the capacity to store large amounts of wine. Many of them get 2 deliveries a week because they just don't have the storage capacity for all the wine and spirits they're going to be selling. So this idea that you would not sell transactionally, that you would look at the larger way of building a relationship built on real business value, and that the sale is merely a byproduct of that. When you get good at this, you're going to be able to sell more product than you ever thought possible. Eric has a question. Can you define value in an info world? Eric, I'm not 100% sure where you're going with that, so feel free to elaborate. I will do my best until I see a little bit more detail. So I guess what Eric's saying is so much of the value is in information, right? It's not in the product itself. Like here, this Cabernet is, 40% French oak, 60% American oak, half of it's new. This isn't value. Bringing information and product attributes isn't value. Information like trends, what's working and what's not, what are your competitors doing? Value isn't just about the product itself. It's not even about like spending money. Yeah, it'd be great if you booked your daughter's wedding there for 200 people and gave them all that business. Hopefully they would reciprocate. But that is not what we're talking about. In an information world, you need insights to grow the business, to be more profitable, to increase revenue, to grow foot traffic, and all of those things we were just talking about. So Eric, I don't know if that's where you were thinking, but feel free to add a little bit more to that comment if you want. So I'm going to just, I can't interact with you except through the comments. So I have no idea whether any of this is resonating. I can't see your heads nodding, but I'm going to take it on faith that this has been a bit eye-opening for a lot of you. And many of you are going to struggle because you've never really looked at selling this way. You've never tried to, like, as this chart shows, protract the process out. And you might even be saying, well, how in the world can I sell all the wine? I mean, this is going to take forever. If I approach selling this way, I might be lucky to make 1 sale a month. Well, ironically, when you do this all the time, you're making far more than 1 sale a month because you're interacting with many different accounts, not just 1 or 2 at a time. Also, the placements that you make are going to stick. So everything you do literally builds on top of itself. And lastly, you should only be personally selling to accounts that are going to make a really big difference in your business. A case here, a case there, you're just never going to get where you need to go. And you've got to think about, how can I scale what I do? And one of the beautiful things about digital selling is all of the things that you're seeing on this little chart here can be dramatically accelerated and scaled with digital. That's why we use lead generation tools to bring in lots of email subscribers, and we use email marketing to nurture relationships with these trade buyers. And we invite them to seminars about how to grow their wine sales, or how to reduce their inventory, or how to get more foot traffic into their restaurant. We're bringing value. You can scale this and sell a lot more by doing this digitally. Oh, hi, Mauricio from Houston. He has a question. Can you provide a couple of examples of how you would create traffic in a restaurant or a wine store? Yes, I would happily do this, Mauricio. So let's talk about a restaurant first. So The best thing about doing wine dinners for the restaurant is you're bringing in traffic that they wouldn't have otherwise. That's why they're always done on a slow night like a Monday or a Tuesday. But there are lots of ways to help the restaurant bring traffic. One is their assortment. Now, you might think, well, I don't go to a restaurant just because of what they pour by the glass. Maybe not, but you might go to that restaurant because they always have something new and interesting. They always seem to be on the leading edge of what's hot now. If you've ever gone to a restaurant and you're bored stiff at the offerings by the glass, where it's like, ho hum, and by the way, these are the same 12 wines that were here when I was here 3 months ago. You've got to help them keep things fresh, help them understand what are people looking for now, how to adapt to seasonality, how can I turn my offerings around more frequently. So assortment is another big thing. Events are another big thing. And really, if you're selling wine and spirits today, you need to be, as a salesperson, you need to be an expert on how to use social media and email marketing to drive business into an account. So if it was me and I was calling on a restaurant, I would ask them, how large is your email list? How often do you send communication to your fans that are on your email list about special events, about, this week, we just got a crate of king salmon in this week and we're going to run it on special. How often are you doing that sort of thing? How are you using your social feeds to drive traffic to the restaurant? You, as a seller of wine and spirits, can be helping them, because I promise you, they don't have time to do it on their own. Now, let's talk about an off-premise store. So much of this is around e-commerce and digital. So go look at the website of a package store that you'd like to do business with. Ask them how large their email list is. Ask them what software they're using and how to leverage that. The modern seller of wine and spirits must have these digital skills. Just having great product knowledge is not enough. You have to know how to help them with their traffic. So much of that has to do with digital media, social media, and email marketing. So Maurizio, I hope that answers the question. Now, we've opened up a lot of different doors here, and I'm going to wrap this up in just a minute, but I don't want to leave you hanging. What you just saw is a sampling of a much larger training program that we have. And one of the pieces is the elaboration of the 4 phases of the sales cycle, where we look at each of the 4 phases and we go through this process, how to tell if you're in that phase, more importantly, what to do when you're in that phase, and then what the spirit of the phase is. So you have the right mindset at each stage of the process. If you liked what you saw today, I encourage you to visit winesalesstimulator.com, where we have a lot more additional resources on how to be effective selling wine and spirits. I also want to invite you to look more closely at our private group coaching program called Wine Sales Stimulator. And you can find all of that information at winesalesstimulator.com. Thank you.